Okay, I think we're rolling. What is going on, ladies and gents? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the #1 student podcast in the world, the Student Podcast. First things first, I'd like to address the two quite massive elephants in the room. One being I'm wearing headphones. Yes, I'm about to take these off because basically I've been having a couple of problems with the audio of the microphone. So if you probably didn't notice, but a couple episodes back, the episode where I dived into mental health, the gain on the microphone was way too high. So it's quite disturbing listening to it, and I've listened to it back and I've thought like, right, I need to sort out the audio. And then my first episode with Andy was a little bit too quiet because I didn't put the gain high enough. So I basically just put the headphones on to make sure that everything's sound, but I can now take these out. Place them there. The second elephant that I'd like to address in the room is that I'm wearing glasses. So you're probably thinking, Tom, why are you wearing glasses? Are they prescriptive? Are they not? And the answer to that is no, they're not prescription glasses. I'm just wearing them for show. So I decided to buy these glasses because basically I want to just start looking like an architect. I know that sounds ridiculous, and you probably architect students are looking at me like, what is he on about? But basically I bought these glasses for when I present to do my work, when I dress up a little bit smarter, you know, for a good occasion, for a presentation, for crits, etc. I wanted to wear some glasses to make me look more the part. I wanted to look like Le Corbusier. If anyone knows that reference, then you'd understand the joke. But basically, Le Corbusier was a very, very famous architect, and he wore glasses all the time, and he wore some like quite funky ones. So I basically ordered these from ASOS. They were £10, and I thought they looked pretty cool. So I need a bit of a clean, to be honest. So I thought they looked pretty cool. So I bought them, and I'm decided to wear them for this podcast and see how it looks on the podcast and see what you guys think. So this podcast is obviously, as you can probably tell, I'm on my own and I'm back at home for the weekend, purely down to the fact that I've been going home a lot recently, which I'll explain later on in the podcast. But yeah, no one's really in the house this weekend, so I thought I'd just nip back, see the family, not realising that my sister and my mum have actually gone to Barcelona for 3 days. So it's just me and David in the house, but David's not actually here at the moment, so I thought I'd just film a cheeky little podcast. So I feel like I haven't really dived into kind of talking about my third year so far at university. So I thought I'd kind of base this podcast around that, and then answering obviously some of you guys' questions that you've asked me on Instagram. If you're not following my Instagram, it's at Tom Rowe with 2 W's. And also one thing about that Instagram page is that there's been so many people that have come up to me and said, is your name Tomorrow? Because they've obviously looked at my name on Instagram that says Tom Rowe with 2 W's, and they think it's spelt tomorrow, or it looks like it's spelt tomorrow. So basically type in tomorrow into Instagram and my account will come up. So yes, today this podcast, I'm going to dive into my kind of experience so far in third year. So I'm 3 weeks in. And to be honest, it is getting very, very hectic. It is getting crazy hectic. So I kind of thought I'd just cover my experience so far, as I feel like I haven't really spoke to people much about it, to be honest. And obviously I haven't really been making too many YouTube videos. I've been making these podcasts once a week. So you're probably wondering, why am I only doing one a week? And that's because basically I'm trying to get ahead of the game. I'm trying to just film these podcasts in advance and then uploading them every Sunday at like 10, 12 o'clock midday. I'm basically just setting myself up so that I can actually get these podcasts out while still keeping on top of my work, etc. And you're probably wondering why I haven't been doing so many YouTube videos, and that's basically just because I haven't really had time. I've had so much stuff going on, which I'll explain later on in the podcast. So I was thinking of doing more podcasts, so more of these solo ones, and uploading these like midweek. If you guys want me to do that, please let me know. I'm basically struggling to balance everything at the moment. I know that balance is something I bang on about all the time, but I'm personally struggling with that at the moment. So I'm trying to just plan ahead. So the podcast that is going out on Sunday, which is tomorrow today, but obviously this podcast won't be going up till next week. It's all getting a bit confusing. With Scott Addison, I filmed that last weekend, but I wanted to save that for this weekend, just so I could kind of relax for the week and not have to stress about the podcast. So I'm basically just going to try and keep ahead of the game and keep on top of it, just so I can get these videos and podcasts out for you guys, as well as obviously keeping on top of my work, etc. I also need to learn to speak a little bit slower, because I feel like I speak really, really quick in these podcasts, and I need to speak a little bit more like this, but I feel like this would be quite annoying, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm here with my decaf coffee. So I've actually resorted back to decaf again, purely down to the fact that I've been sleeping pretty much next to nothing for the past 3-4 weeks. Hang on one sec. For you audio people, I'm just about to take a sip of my my coffee and a little bit of a ASMR for you. So basically, with everything that's been going on at university, probably I'd say a week before I went back to uni, I started to struggle with my sleep. It was just all over the place. My routine wasn't really set. Obviously, throughout my diet and everything like that, if you guys are watching that series, Living Lean, you know that I was pretty much bang on money with everything. Everything was planned out perfectly. I'd wake up the same time every day. I'd go to work, I'd meal prep, I'd then train at a certain time, I'd then go to bed. I'd put my blue light blockers on at a certain time, I'd have my last meal, go to bed, sleep really, really well, wake up in the morning, pretty much just repeat that for 3 months. And I was in a really, really good routine. I was absolutely smashing it. I was really, really good at keeping on top of everything and making sure that I was being really disciplined. I was making sure that I was definitely having that meal at this time. I was training at this time. I was going to work at this time. And everything was just really, really good. I was on top of everything. And then kind of after my diet, it kind of all went a bit sporadic. I started to obviously go out a little bit more, drink, see the lads, spend time with the family. And the routine kind of just went out the window. So this was probably about August time. And I started to get back into a routine again. And then pretty much the week before I went to uni, obviously packing all the stuff up again, seeing my mates a lot more, going away, going to Amsterdam, etc. The routine went completely out of the window, and I've pretty much not found a routine ever since. And for me, I pretty much live my life around routine. I feel like I'm most optimal in a routine, and obviously most people should be most optimal in a routine. But if you're not a routine kind of person, I can understand why. But for me, I work really, really well in a routine. If I've got like a set time to do something, I'll make sure I get it done then. If I need to film and edit a YouTube video, I'll make sure I do it then. If I need to go to the gym, etc. So for me, I've always lived my life around a routine, and I've been very successful with studying architecture, doing the YouTube, keeping on top of the training, the dieting, and I've been very good at doing that in the past 2 years just by keeping into a decent routine, keeping on top of my stuff. But recently it's just been bad, and because of that, my sleep has kind of gone out the window, and I haven't been diagnosed with it, but I do really think that I'm suffering with insomnia at the moment, purely down to the fact that I haven't had a decent night's sleep in like a month. So I pretty much, when I go to bed, I get into bed and my brain literally comes alive. I'm not sure if any of you guys are listening to this and you have the same experience, but when I get into bed, this is when my brain absolutely explodes. Everything happens. Like the other day, I think it was 2 nights ago, I was pretty much a potato all day. I was half asleep all day. Obviously with insomnia, I do really struggle to get to sleep, and then once I do go to sleep, I wake up probably about at least 10 times a night. So I'm pretty much just rolling around half awake all night, and then I'm really, really tired in the day, so I'm not really productive in the day because I'm so tired. So what usually happens is I spend my day pretty much being a potato, not really thinking about much. My brain's kind of dead. I'm just thinking about going to bed, just want to sleep. And then when I get into bed and relax and kind of let myself settle, my brain explodes. It comes to life. It goes crazy. And I'm basically in this cycle at the moment where I'm struggling to get out of it. My sleep has been all over the place with all this university work, which I'll go into in a minute. And yeah, I've just been really struggling with my sleep recently. So last night I decided to take some tablets. They're not like prescribed tablets or anything like that. I didn't want to get anything too strong because I don't really want to get addicted to something. And I'm not actually joking. Last night I was passed out literally. I think I took the tablet just after 10 o'clock. I made sure I was wearing my blue light blockers a few hours before. I made sure that I had my last meal 2 hours before going to bed, etc. Made sure my room was nice and cool. The environment was perfect. I made sure I had a shower before going to bed so I wasn't sweaty. Took my tablet. 20 minutes later, bang, gone. I was absolutely out of it. And then I woke up at 9 o'clock this morning. Like, what on earth has just happened? It was absolutely unbelievable night's sleep. I woke up this morning like really quite tired. When I woke up, I was quite like, whoa, I feel a bit like I want to go back to bed. But apparently that's one of the side effects. But to be honest, I slept really, really well. But now it's kind of dodgy grounds where I don't want to start relying on these sleeping tablets to make sure I sleep, because if I start doing that, I'm obviously going to get addicted to them and I'm going to start relying on them. And that's probably not a good idea, especially if I did get something stronger, which I probably won't. So tonight I might try going to sleep without the tablets. And see how that works. But yeah, this is pretty much just the life of a student, especially a third year student who's pretty much trying to do everything, and it's just getting all on top of me, to be honest. So yeah, one thing I wanted to dive into about third year so far, and something that I've noticed, is that my head of year is definitely pushing ourselves to market ourselves, to kind of like brand ourselves and create our own style in architecture. So for the past 2 years, we've kind of been developing these ideas of what a floor plan is, what a section is, what an elevation is, what like a site analysis, etc. But this year, I'm not sure if this is different for all the other universities, but my tutor is really, really pushing us to kind of step out of our comfort zone, kind of forget about everything we learned in first and second year, and really try and start developing our own style, developing our understanding in architecture, and thinking about things much more conceptually, much more abstract way of thinking. And to be honest, I'm really, really enjoying it, but I'm really finding it tough to get my head around a few things. So one thing that she's kind of taught us to kind of start implementing into our own work is like more diagrams, more diagrammatic things. So very conceptual, very abstract, like I've already mentioned. And I've also actually started to buy some books. So one thing that I always recommend everyone to do is to buy books and read books, because you can learn a lot from reading. But for me personally, I haven't read a book since I was probably about 8, which is bad, maybe even younger than that. Anyway, so I've dived into Amazon, dipped my fingers in Amazon. I've actually ordered some books, so I thought I'd just show you guys on camera, just so you guys can get an insight on what kind of things we're doing at the moment. So the first book that I've ordered is the diagrams, or the diagrams of architecture. So I haven't actually started reading these yet. I've had a quick look through, looked at all the diagrams and everything, and I've also ordered this book, which is called Drawing and Architecture. So if you guys can get yourself one of these books, or if you can read it somewhere online or whatever, this will give you an insight into kind of like what work I'm doing at the moment. It's just very, very, the only way I can explain it, it's very conceptual, very abstract, very diagrammatic, very kind of maths and scientific based stuff. So I've been looking at a few architects' work, one being Perry Culper and another being Daniel Libskind, because it's got a D on the end. Libskin, maybe, I'm not sure, look it up. And they're really, really good architects that do kind of test the idea of diagrams, very conceptual architecture, and it's kind of like a more artistic way of representing work. And this is the kind of thing that we are doing this year, which is very, very cool. So like I've mentioned in previous podcasts and previous videos, I have questioned whether I want to be an architect or not, just because I feel like I've kind of not fallen out of love with it, but with going into practice, I haven't really enjoyed it as much as I thought I would in practice in a working environment. So I have actually questioned whether I want to be an architect or not. But doing this third year, doing it very kind of artistic and very design based, it has kind of brought it back to life for me. I'm much more creative now. I can kind of test the boundaries. I'm not restricted to like certain rules in architecture. So one thing that our head of year is, or my tutor has taught us so far, is to create rules. So you can pretty much do anything in architecture as long as you create a rule, as long as you've got a reason as to why you are doing something, and you can back it up with some ideas that you have. You back it up with architects and their work and how people have shown their work in different ways. As long as you've got a reason and a why behind your work, it doesn't actually matter. So one thing that we've been doing recently is, my tutor, if you listen to this, she doesn't like the word site analysis, but if you architecture students obviously listen to this, you'll understand what site analysis is. Where it's when you go to the site, you analyze the site, you maybe analyze shadows, you maybe analyze environment, atmosphere, access points, that kind of stuff, how people are accessing the site, what kind of people are on the site, whether it's quite a vibrant place, whether it's quite populated, all these kind of things. And one thing that our tutor has kind of pushed us to do is the idea of constructing. So constructing, basically, when you record as much data as possible on site, and you will then go and create a collage using the images that you have got and all the recordings that you have got, to create this one piece of work, this one big collage, to pretty much explain your story and your idea of the site through this kind of like artistic piece of work, through like layering of tracing paper, layering of photos, different colors, different text, and just like this big piece of work that's going to pretty much describe the site as how you've seen it personally. And I've actually started posting some stuff on my Instagram. So I've actually created a kind of like a creative / design based page, which is actually called Tom Rowe Designs. So Tom Rowe without the 2 W's, just 1 W this time, design. And this is a page where I'm pretty much just going to show all of my work throughout this year as I go along. So like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast about marketing yourself, this is kind of like my starting point for marketing myself on Instagram, actually showing off my work. And I'm also going to do highlights of kind of like the architecture podcast on that channel as well, just to give people an insight on the different things I do. So obviously I do this podcast. I am studying to be an architect. So if I can combine them kind of things in a creative page, that's what I'm doing with the Tom Rowe Design. So if you want to check out my work, go ahead and do that. I'll be posting a lot of things on there, and I'll probably even post like my second year work. I'm also thinking of doing a portfolio video on my channel very, very soon. So I kind of wanted to get into the course before doing it, just to get my mind back in the way of thinking about being an architect, etc. And then I'm going to do pretty much like a full breakdown of my second year portfolio, which actually got me a first. So I was very, very happy with that. And I'm going to break down kind of the tutor's feedback. I'm going to break down pretty much every single stage that I went through to get a first in second year. And I will show that full portfolio for you guys on my YouTube channel very, very soon. It'll probably be in the next month or so, because it's going to take me quite a while to edit it, etc. So yeah, the first 3 weeks of university in third year has been crazy. It's been absolutely bonkers. So we started off kind of looking. So basically, our how do I say this? In our brief, we basically have to find a site in Digbeth, which is in Birmingham. You basically get given a site, and our task was to find all the vacant lots. So what we mean by vacant lots, we mean like abandoned buildings, maybe vacant parking lots where people aren't really, like abandoned spaces pretty much. And we basically had to walk around our site, walk around Digbeth, and kind of jot down and record all the vacant lots around Digbeth. And then a week later, we had to kind of decide on which vacant lot we wanted to do, which we found most interesting, what we thought would be the best place to design our building. And that was kind of like the first few weeks of third year, kind of looking into these vacant lots. We've done loads and loads and loads of like AutoCAD files where we've got loads of different information about kind of like building heights, access routes, thresholds. There's loads and loads of stuff like that which we've gone into, which is really, really useful information when we do actually come to designing. Which we don't actually start designing until January, which I find interesting. So this year is pretty much split up into two. So up until January, it's pretty much site analysis. But like I mentioned earlier on, we don't like to call it site analysis. She likes to call it like constructing and then deconstructing. So constructing being obviously recording everything on the site, and then deconstructing is when you try and pick out little bits of information from the site that you maybe find more interesting. And then we go into reconstructing, which is then you designing your building. So you construct, so you get all the information. You deconstruct, which is going to be where you go into more detail into those elements. And then reconstructing is when we're going to be designing our building based on the information that we have gathered, and maybe some key themes or key words that we have taken out of all the information that we've recorded. I feel like a tutor right now. I feel like I'm fully explaining my project. Anyway, so we spent a few weeks looking at the vacant lots, as this is going to be where our site is this is our site. So I've chosen a vacant lot, which is kind of like on the edge of Digbeth, kind of like southwest of Digbeth. Obviously you guys probably won't understand this, but yeah, I found a vacant lot which I thought was very interesting because it's kind of it's along the boundary of where the very industrial side of Digbeth, and then kind of along this road where my vacant lot is, it kind of then moves into like a residential area where there's lots of schools, etc. So I thought it was quite an interesting point to have a building kind of between the industrial and the residential side of things, so like the juxtaposition between the two, between industrial and residential. So that was one of the kind of places that I chose, and that is where I've been pretty much analysing, where I've been constructing, and I've pretty much just looked at everything on the site. What you usually do, you just go around and take loads of pictures, take loads of videos, anything that kind of stands out to you, take a picture of. So like maybe signs, maybe litter on the floor, maybe I think I was taking pictures of like speed signs and that kind of stuff, like the bus stops, what time the buses come off, that kind of thing. And actually yesterday I was at my site, so I was at this place for 12 hours. So I was at my site for 12 hours, and what I've basically done is from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the evening, I was sat there and took a picture every half an hour for 12 hours to kind of create this like sequence of pretty much time, people, activity, environment, atmosphere, that kind of thing. And I've now pretty much got this board where I've got all these pictures. So I think it's about 100 pictures, and it pretty much tells the story of what the site looks like over time, over a day, on a busy kind of Friday afternoon, or from the morning till the evening. It was actually really, really interesting to see how the space changes over time. So it was actually a really good day to do it because it was raining at one point, it was really sunny at another point, and then it started raining again, and it was quite cloudy. So actually in this kind of diagram that I have, in this like sequence of photos that I have, it's quite interesting how the space kind of changes and how the environment and atmosphere changes throughout the day. And also looking at maybe around 8 o'clock, it's a little bit more busy, people going to work, etc. And then kind of around midday, a lot of cars kind of parked up to go for their lunch, etc. because there was a little pub on the corner. And then in the evening, obviously people going back home, a little bit of traffic around and that kind of stuff. So it was really interesting to see this kind of sequence and how over time the site kind of changed, the atmosphere changed, the people using the space changed, kind of like the population, etc. And I thought it was a really interesting task that I did, and I'm now going to kind of do diagrams from that, using architects' work to kind of back up my ideas and that kind of stuff. So as you can probably tell from me speaking about this, it's becoming very conceptual, it's becoming quite interesting. We're kind of thinking outside of the box. We're not kind of thinking about your generic floor plans, your site plans, that kind of stuff. We're kind of testing the boundaries and looking at kind of like a new way of looking at architecture, because she basically wants us to develop our own style. She wants us to start thinking outside the box and actually starting thinking like proper architects, because in the past 2 years you kind of just develop your idea of what a floor plan is, section, etc., like I've already mentioned, and I find it really, really interesting so far in this year and how we're kind of being pushed. The boundaries are being really, really pushed, and yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing in my studio at the moment, which has been really, really fun, but a lot of work. Like the other day I pretty much broke down because we had so much going on, and I remember I went into uni on Thursday with all this work that I did and I thought it was really good, and then my tutor turned around and said that it was wrong and it wasn't what she was looking for, etc. And I pretty much just like broke down because I'd spent so much time doing all this work and then it was all wrong. But yeah, it's really, really good. And then obviously we've got our other modules going on as well. So we've got a tech module, we've got a studio module, which is the one I pretty much just spoke about, that kind of like the design module. And then we've got our cultural context, which is diving into, that's going to be like our dissertation, our essay. So tech, we're looking at pretty much daylighting. So my group is looking at daylighting at a building in Oxford. I can't actually tell you the name of this building. That's really, really bad because I should know. But yeah, we're basically just testing the daylight of this building. So we're doing physical models and then digital models. So I'm actually part of the digital model team, so that's what I'm doing. And then we're actually doing like sections. So we're cutting through the site, through the building, and analysing daylighting at each point, because it's actually a really, really interesting building. It's got a It's got an auditorium in it, and then we're kind of looking at like the foyer space and how they've used the space to kind of utilising the light to get natural lighting in, etc. So it's actually really interesting in tech. And then cultural context is basically our dissertation, where we're doing a 5,000 word essay, and mine is pretty much about new approaching in housing. So we're looking at kind of like co-living, and looking to basically tackle affordable housing issues, because obviously with the vast expanding population, obviously in specific areas around the world, housing is getting like proper expensive now, and we're basically looking at how through like sustainable solutions, look through co-living, through like commerce, we're pretty much just looking at how we can tackle the issue of affordable living, looking at kind of like financial pooling, which is kind of like a business term. And yeah, it's really interesting. So recently we've just done a book review. So she basically gave us a list of books that we can look at, and then we pretty much just had to do a critical appraisal, or like a critical analysis of the book, talking about how the author has like interacted with maybe the case studies he's used, how he's used the article to create an argument, whether it's a successful argument, and how that compares to other books as well. And that was really interesting to get an insight into some of the case studies that are looking to tackle affordable issues. And yeah, really kind of enjoying third year at the moment. It's really interesting. It's just a lot of work, as you can probably tell. And to be honest, what do you expect? You're an architecture student. If first and second year is crazy, then third year is going to be bonkers, because third year is the year that counts. Third year is the year that you're going to be getting your grade. This is your graduation year. You are graduating to become a BA honours architect, which is unbelievable. So I will graduate in like June time. So you can expect this to be a very tough year. If you are a third year student going into third year, then definitely prepare yourself, if you haven't already, to set yourself up for doing a lot of work and really pushing yourself, creating a brand for yourself, marketing yourself, setting up your own Instagram, showing people your work, getting opinions of people. And one thing that I do advise people to do is speak to your tutors a lot, because at the end of the day, like I mentioned before, the tutors are the people that are giving you the grade. They are there to help you. This is what you are pretty much paying for at university. You're paying for this kind of one-on-one tuition time. Like my university, so Birmingham City University, is very good for having tutors there that are constantly helping you, constantly there to help you. And my tutor's there all day, every day pretty much, apart from Sundays, ready to help you if anyone needs any help. She's doing work constantly. She's sending out emails every Sunday to tell us what we're doing all week. And it's really quite organised this year, and it's really good. I'm feeling much happier than this year than I have in other years. However, I am struggling with the whole sleep thing and balancing all my stuff. Sorry, my voice is hurting now. So yeah, that is like an insight into my third year so far. Another thing that I've actually been working on, which I haven't mentioned yet, is actually I've put myself in for a London competition. So this is a London competition against other universities. So I'm representing BCU with six other students on my course. And we're basically doing a London project that is also looking to tackle like sustainable issues, affordable issues. And we've basically been given a brief where we've got 2 weeks to design. What we're going to be doing is like a intervention to help the disability or the disabled, which is really interesting. So I went to London on Tuesday last week for this kind of meeting, and they gave us the brief and everything they presented to us. And then I've got to go back in 2 weeks' time for like the final presentation, where we have to submit like an A1 panel, a presentation, and then we can do like a model if we want, or a video or something, which might be quite cool if I decide to do that. And then we basically present in front of all these universities and also a panel of judges, which is going to be really interesting. And I'm someone who has always kind of struggled with presenting. You guys probably think I'm quite good at speaking, because I obviously speak to the camera a lot. But for me, this stuff doesn't really come naturally to me. So when I started YouTube, I was very quiet, and I didn't really want to speak to the camera because I was very nervous with speaking to the camera. And if I did say something, I'd probably say like a couple words. But for me, doing YouTube and making videos is completely different to kind of presenting in front of a class of 100 people, say, which is very, very daunting. So everyone always says to me at university, like, you should be really good at presenting because you speak to the camera all the time. But yeah, I speak to the camera, I can edit out things that I've said wrong, whereas if I'm speaking in front of a group of 100 people, if I say something wrong, it's a little bit different situation than speaking to a camera. So for me, I've always struggled with presenting, and I knew that this London project was going to be something where I was throwing myself in the deep end, I was throwing myself out of the comfort zone. But to be honest, I pretty much just told myself, like, Tom, you are not going to get any better at doing this if you're not going to keep doing it, if you're not going to keep putting yourself out of your comfort zone, because people don't progress in their comfort zone. Obviously, you guys probably have heard that quote quite a few times. It's been thrown around by so many people, but it's true. If you're not going to progress in your comfort zone, so for me, doing the podcast, putting myself into these situations where I'm presenting to a bunch of strangers and they're judging me on it, it's very, very daunting. But for me, these are the kind of opportunities I do need to take to progress as a person, because ever since I was young, I've always wanted to kind of push my ability with speaking, kind of like the way I speak to people, how I kind of portray myself to someone. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology. So as I've got older, I've always kind of wanted to push myself to do presentations. Yes, I've been very scared to do them, but I've always wanted to push myself because I've always wanted to get good at that. And I've always wanted to tackle that issue that I've had with presenting in front of people. And yeah, that is a project that I've put myself in for, which is going to be fun. And now, excuse me, I thought I'd dive into some questions that once again I asked on my Instagram. And if you are not following my Instagram, get at me so you can get involved in these kind of things. So I picked out 4 really, really good questions that I thought I could go into some detail about. So yeah, the first one being, is it hard to maintain time when studying architecture and working out, say, 5 to 7 times a week? Let's assume that the only time needed is to go to the gym, not making food, etc. So is it hard to maintain time? 100%. Like, this is something that, so this kind of runs with the idea of balance, kind of maintaining time, planning your time out, planning a routine. So something that people always preach, and including myself, is all about the word balance. And for me, I preach it all the time, but I don't necessarily have good balance. Like, I really don't think I have a good balance at the moment. Sometimes I'm swaying much more towards my work. A lot of the time people will sway towards their work because at the end of the day, that is probably the most important thing for me at the moment, just to get my degree, to then get a job, to kind of survive, if you know what I mean. So balance is a key word that people throw around, but people don't necessarily have. So I'm not sure I'm a good person to speak about my experience with balance, but I can definitely give people advice, even though I don't probably use that advice myself. So is it hard to maintain time when studying architecture? 100%. Like I always say, architecture is a very, very tough subject to study. And if you are going into architecture, definitely prepare yourself for doing a lot of work, because I feel like a lot of people dive into architecture not realising what they're actually putting themselves into. And they don't actually realise that you probably need to severely like architecture to get through the years, because you've got to be seriously disciplined, you've got to be seriously dedicated to do all this work. To put yourself through all, obviously, these sleepless nights, etc. So yes, it is difficult to maintain time, and especially with training. So for me, obviously, being someone that has trained for the past 3-4 years now, I've always found it quite difficult to train and do architecture at the same time, but I've always managed to do it. So something that I always speak about is kind of making time. So for me, I kind of make time around my training sessions. So say if I wake up in the morning, I've got a little bit of work to do, I'll then say to myself, right, if you do work up to 1 o'clock, you can then go to the gym for 2 hours, come back, relax for a little bit, and then carry on with doing some work. So for me, I always put aside probably 2 hours a day to make sure I can go to the gym. Recently, I haven't actually been to the gym much at all, which is weird for me. Last week I went a week without training because of all this work that I had on, and me being quite sleep deprived. I didn't really have the energy to go to the gym. And to be honest, my training and my balance is all over the gaff at the moment. So I'm really finding it difficult to balance everything, but I'm sure I'll get back in the swing of it. The next thing you say is, let's assume the only time needed is to go to the gym, not making food. For me, food is more important than actually training. So I definitely make sure that you're setting time aside to make food, etc. Unless you're getting like microwavable stuff, which I probably wouldn't advise. But I spend a lot of time in the kitchen making food, like a lot of time. So I usually have my pre-workout meal, which I'll probably take about half an hour to make. I'll then sit down for about an hour. I'll then go to the gym. I'll then come back, make up some more food. And making food obviously takes up a lot of time. So maybe if you are studying architecture, I'd probably not train 5 to 7 times a week, and maybe like knock it down to maybe 4 to 5 would probably be decent. As long as you are training really, really hard, you are really pushing the intensity in those sessions, and you are making sure that you are constantly progressing every session as well, and making the most of them sessions that you are actually going to the gym. But yes, it's very, very hard to maintain time. But like I mentioned, routine is key for me, and balance is very, very difficult to get. And I think it's something that TM Cycles has mentioned recently, because he's been struggling with kind of like balance and everything. He actually mentioned that people preach a lot about balance, but they don't necessarily have it themselves, and that is a very similar situation to me. I'd say I have a better balance than other people. I've probably got a better balance than most students out there to be able to do obviously the YouTube, to train, to study as an architect, but I wouldn't say my balance is amazing at the moment. It's been a bit all over the place recently. And yeah, the next question being, what was the first week of architecture like? And I'm assuming this was, you're talking about first year. So my first week of architecture, I'm trying to think back now, because it was like 2 years ago. My first week of architecture was, I think it was absolutely crazy. I remember, I think we got given this task basically where we had to figure out, we got given these photos, we got given these plans, we got given these sections. They basically explained what they all were to us. And they gave us the task to go onto one of the computers, use like a software like Illustrator or something, and scale these pictures up to a scale. So at the time, we obviously were like, what is a scale? Like, what does that mean? And they're all saying like, print this out at 1 to 20, print this one out at 1 to 50. And we were thinking like, what on earth are they on about? And I remember that week, I pretty much spent the week trying to print off these plans, sections, elevations to present the following week. And it was absolutely crazy. And to be honest, like my printers at my uni are awful. They don't work properly. Like when you go into when you go into university, a lot of the time maybe your card doesn't work, maybe your login details don't work, so you have to speak to a technician. So to be honest, the first week was a bit all over the place. It was a bit like we were trying to print things out. We didn't know how to scale it. We didn't know what softwares to use. We didn't know how to use the softwares. We didn't know how to use the printers. The printers weren't working. Our cards weren't working. It was a bit of like a stressful week in terms of like just getting to grips with what on earth was going on. But it's definitely a week that I'd utilise to kind of get to know people. A lot of the time you'll get given group work on the first few weeks, and that is a good way to get to know people on the course. And I made some really, really good friends on the first course, and they're all my best friends now at uni. So yeah, it's just a week just kind of settling, get used to the systems, get used to softwares, get used to like the printing method and everything, because to be honest, going into uni, it's a completely different environment to say a working environment or like sixth form or something like that. It's completely different. So definitely utilize that first week to kind of try not to stress too much, but get to grips with what on earth is going on, get to know your tutors a little bit, and you'll be sound. Next question, how can you become the best architect student and have your work set out from the rest? Very, very difficult question. So for me, I find it difficult to answer questions like these because I wouldn't say I'm the best architecture student. I'm only a third year student, so maybe after I've graduated I could kind of look back and see where I could have improved, etc. But one thing I'd say about having your work stand out from the rest, definitely have your own style. Figure out your own way of presenting work and kind of keep that consistent. So say if you were doing a portfolio and you had like a color scheme, or you had a way of presenting your work, kind of follow that throughout the whole portfolio to kind of make sure that your work kind of not looks the same, but it looks like your kind of work. If someone looks at that portfolio, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's Tom's work because he's used these colors, or he's used this kind of like graphic design skill or whatever. So definitely do that to have your work stand out from the rest, kind of like have your own kind of style, and kind of push that throughout the years, kind of run with that and kind of develop on your own style. And how to become the best architect student: keep on top of your work if you can. That's probably one thing. Take your tutor's feedback into consideration and definitely use their feedback, because at the end of the day, they're the professionals and they're the ones that are marking your work. So definitely consider and use your tutor's feedback. Definitely listen to what your tutors are saying. Really listen in, make notes what they're saying to make sure that you are writing everything down. And be confident in your work, be really happy with your work. If you have an idea, run with it and like really push that, so when you present you can really be like, this is my idea, I think it's really, really good, and make it look like you are enjoying it, make it look like you are really confident in your work, so when you present you can be much more confident, and then you can kind of stand out from the rest when you present as well. Not only when they kind of look through their portfolio, you can stand out when you actually present verbally as well. So they're the probably tips I'd probably give you. Like I mentioned, maybe after I've graduated, I'll probably do like a more in-depth video talking about that kind of stuff. And the final question, or the fourth and final question, is going to be, I'm a first year architect student. I constantly feel like I should be doing work. How do I chill out? Okay, so looking backwards, like going back a step, I am definitely not the person to ask about how to chill out, because for me, I am someone that doesn't chill out. I never chill out. I can't chill out. I find it really hard to sit down and watch a film. Never mind chilling out, because I feel like I should always be doing something. But if you are a first year student and you feel like you are constantly doing work, it's probably because you are constantly doing work and you constantly have work to do, because it is hectic, especially if you are someone that is not coming from like a coursework background. Going in to study architecture and having all this coursework, it's going to be completely mind-blowing. It's going to be crazy for you, but it's something that you just got to get used to. And something that I'd probably say, how do you chill out? It's definitely, like I mentioned, have this kind of routine where you get up, do a little bit of work, go to the gym, and then you spend some time with your mates in the evening. You do a bit of work here and there. Just make sure you kind of keep on top of your work, keep on top of it all. And that way you can probably try and chill out. So for me, my issue is that I constantly feel like, I know this is a weird idea, but I feel like I'm running out of time. That sounds really strange me saying that, but basically I feel like I should be constantly doing something, where even whether when I'm relaxing, when I'm sat watching a film, I'm sat there doing an Instagram post, I'm sat there kind of typing up some stuff, some ideas. And I'm constantly thinking about work. I'm constantly thinking about YouTube, ways that I can improve. And personally for me, I really, really do struggle to chill out. But it's definitely something I push people to do. And it's something that I'm pushing myself to do at the moment, because at the end of the day, you can go into like burnout mode. You can go into like, you could break down. You could overdo the work, and if you don't actually chill out, maybe some really good ideas won't actually come to you, because you don't give that time where your brain kind of relaxes and it kind of shuts off from all your work. So definitely try and figure out a way to chill out, because that is something that I highly advise and something that I don't do myself, which I'm actually pushing myself to do recently. And yeah, I think that's going to be it for this podcast today, ladies and gents. I hope you enjoyed another kind of solo podcast. I hope you enjoyed the glasses. Yeah, let's wear them. And yeah, if you've got any more questions, please let me know down below. As always, if you've got any more questions, you can drop me a message on Instagram if you're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes. And yeah, thank you as always for listening to the #1 student podcast in the world. Peace.